Grindhouse.com defines a grindhouse as follows. A grindhouse is an American term for a theatre that mainly showed exploitation films. It is also a term used to describe the genre of films that played in such theatres. Grindhouse films are also referred to as exploitation films. My grindhouse experience was different than the New York Times Square grindhouse fans. I grew up in Sydney, Australia, and my grindhouses were a combination of grand but down on their luck CBD cinemas like the State and the Capitol, and working class western suburb cinemas like the Regal in Liverpool and the Roxy in Parramatta. They were my church, my temple, my synagogue, my Scientology celebrity centre. The difference being that in the cinemas I got my money's worth and nobody molested me. I'm Terry from Paleo Cinema Podcast, and in no particular order, these are my top 10 grindhouse movies I saw in actual grindhouses. Blaxploitation movies were a big part of the programming in Sydney cinemas in the 1970s. The audience was overwhelmingly white, but we identified with people who were hassled by the police, looked down on by wealthier people, and who lived life on their own terms. For us, it wasn't a matter of race, but of socio-economic status. Directed by this guy, actor and director Jack Starrett, Slaughter starred Jim Brown, Stella Stevens, Rip Torn, Don Gordon, and Cameron Mitchell. The plot wasn't terribly original. Jim Brown plays the titular character, a Vietnam veteran ex-Green Beret, whose father is killed in a car bomb. Slaughter goes after the Cleveland Mafia who blew his daddy up, kills some of them but misses the actual assassin, Dominic Hoffer, played by Rip Torn. Slaughter gets charged with first-degree murder, but Treasury Department official Price, played by Cameron Mitchell, sends him down to an unnamed South American country accompanied by Treasury agents Harry, Don Gordon, and Kim, Marlene Clark, to catch a mafia boss called Mario Felice, who has a supercomputer he uses to expedite his criminal activities. Dominic Hoffo is Felice's 2IC, and a less stable asshole you won't see in a blaxploitation movie. Rip Torn doesn't only chew the scenery, he swallows it and shits it out as well. Stella Stevens plays Anne, Hoffo's girlfriend, and like any blonde woman in a blaxploitation movie, she gets the instant hots for Slaughter, so we get the usual semi-tasteful but gratuitously nude sex scene. Hoffo beats up Anne, which gives Slaughter another reason to give Hoffo a prolonged and painful death, including an improvised cremation. The movie was successful enough to generate a sequel with one of the greatest 1970s titles of any exploitation movie, Slaughter's Big Rip-Off. This movie is unashamedly B grade, and I loved it at the time I saw it, and still have a great fondness for it when I re-watch it. Here in Australia we aren't known for martial arts movies, but in the early 1970s Australia had a cultural renaissance. We escaped from decades of a deeply boring conservative government that thought all we wanted in life was cricket, beer, iced Vovos, and racist ads for business shirts. But we did make at least 2 reasonable martial arts films over the years. In 2002 there was Trojan Warrior starring a kickboxing champion called Stan the Man Logonides. Trojan Warrior has the contradictory qualities of being at the same time not very good and yet still quite enjoyable. It also had cameos from every Z-list Australian celebrity who wasn't in a grave or in a jail. 27 years earlier, during the multicultural moment that was the cinematic martial arts craze, Brian Trenchard Smith made The Man from Hong Kong. Right out of the gate, we see the redoubtable Roger Ward beat the shit out of Hong Kong action film icon Sammo Hung on top of the iconic Australian Inselberg known as Uluru. You're not allowed to climb Uluru now for 2 very good reasons. Firstly, to the Indigenous traditional owners, it is a sacred site and we should respect that. The second reason is that Roger Ward left Sammo Hung-sized dents all over it. We go from punch-ups on national icons to Grant Page stunting for Roz Spears as he flies a hang glider over Hong Kong. The hang glider lands on a parade field at Hong Kong Police Headquarters, where she meets Jimmy Wong Yu playing Inspector Fong Seng Leng, who gets tasked with going to Sydney to interview Sammo's character. There he meets 2 local coppers, Roger Ward's Bob Taylor and Hugh Keysburn's wonderfully named Maury Gross, whose jovial racism pisses him off. He also encounters gunrunner and drug importer Jack Wilton, played by ex-007 George Lazenby. We also get Wilton's henchman Willard, played by Frank Thring, Dream Girl Angelica, played by Rebecca Gilling, and every stunt driver south of New Guinea. We get foot chases through the back streets of Darlinghurst, a kung fu fight in a Chinese restaurant kitchen, insanely dangerous car chases and crashes, romantic rural lovemaking, and a truly epic abseil down the side of a skyscraper in North Sydney. The Man from Hong Kong is balls-to-the-wall action, an unapologetic exploitation movie with an old-school Australian sense of anarchic fun and shamelessly racist epithets. Larry Cohen's movies are unique. Nobody else would think to make a film about an ancient flying Aztec god taking up residence in the Chrysler Building in New York City and plucking victims off rooftops. Add to this innately silly concept, you get the craziness of Michael Moriarty as ex-junkie minor criminal Jimmy Quinn, who, after a botched jewelry heist, accidentally finds the monster's nest. Jimmy liaises with two cops played by cult favourites David Carradine and Richard Roundtree, while he's negotiating a deal with the city of New York for a reward for telling them where the Aztec god has its crib. Cue the Winged Serpent is a good gateway drug to the cinema of Larry Cohen. From monster babies in the It's Alive series, through the comedic critique of consumerism called The Stuff, his blaxploitation homages to the 1931 gangster film Little Caesar, Black Caesar and Hell Up in Harlem starring Fred the Hammer Williamson, his hermaphrodite space Jesus in God Told Me To, and later films like The Ambulance and Original Gangsters. There's never been a movie maker with the quirky, imaginative chutzpah of Larry Cohen. In 2017, Steve Mitchell directed a documentary on Larry called King Cohen, The Wild World of Filmmaker Larry Cohen, which is one of the films I most want to see this year. If you like Grindhouse movies, you have to love the movies of Larry Cohen. It's hard to overstate how big a star Bruce Lee was before his untimely death in 1973. He blazed a trail that others like Jackie Chan, Sonny Chiba, Jet Li, Chow Yun-fat, Tony Jaa, Iko Uwais, and others have followed. He was the breakout Asian male action star. An all but superhumanly adept martial artist, intellectually gifted, charismatic as hell, and bursting with controlled energy, he would have changed the landscape of action cinema beyond all recognition had he lived longer. We first knew him as Kato in the short-lived Green Hornet TV series in 1966 and 67, which was a spin-off of the old Batman series. Then he played a karate-kicking hitman in the movie Marlowe with James Garner. He was also the martial arts coordinator on a Dean Martin, Matt Helms spy comedy before he headed back to Hong Kong to make the 4 movies he's most famous for. 3 Hong Kong wuxia films, The Big Boss, The Chinese Connection, and The Way of the Dragon, in which he beat Chuck Norris's character to death in the Roman Colosseum. And then the big one, Warner Brothers produced Enter the Dragon. They backed Lee with John Saxon, who'd been acting in movies since the late 1950s and had a black belt in karate, and another karate expert, Jim Kelly, who'd had a role in one previous film. The plot of Enter the Dragon is pretty simple. Lee, a Shaolin martial artist, is recruited by British intelligence to investigate the island of a crime lord Han, played by Shi Qian, who is suspected of drug smuggling and human trafficking. Han hosts a martial arts tournament on the island where Roper, John Saxon, and Williams, Jim Kelly, are also competitors. Lee, Roper and Williams fight in the tournament, find out what's really going on, and then it's on like Donkey Kong. Directed by Robert Clouse, who made the underrated Darker Than Amber with Rod Taylor, and with a career best soundtrack by Lalo Schifrin, Enter the Dragon is pure kinetic action. It is Lee at his best. We also get a cool flashback sequence where his sister, played by Angela Mao Yin, fights gangsters through Hong Kong slums. It's also a movie that damaged more children than any other because all of us tried to do this. With homemade nunchucks, and we damaged ourselves to varying degrees. But Enter the Dragon is the one breakout martial arts film of the 1970s, and it's still incredibly watchable to this day. I'm going to pretend that the Nicolas Cage Neil LaBute 2006 remake of The Wicker Man doesn't exist. Not the beast! Ah! I recommend that you do too. Robin Hardy's original movie has an intricate script by Anthony Schaefer and an unforgettable climax. It takes us to Summerisle, an island off the Scottish coast which has a strangely temperate climate. Police Sergeant Neil Howie, played by Edward Woodward, is sent to Summerisle to investigate the disappearance of a local schoolgirl, Rowan Morrison. When he gets there, Howie discovers that the islanders deny that Rowan ever existed. He finds on Summerisle a pagan Wiccan society under the benign rule of Lord Summerisle, Christopher Lee in one of his best roles. This conflicts deeply with Howie's resolutely conservative Christianity. As the mystery deepens, we find out more about Howie, the pagan beliefs of the islanders, and the suspense ramps up. All the way up to and including the unforgettable climax, this film actively mocks religious beliefs. Whether it's Howie's sexually repressed celibate Christianity, or the Wiccan religion imposed on the islanders by Lord Summerisle's ancestor, Hardy and Schaefer show religious belief as dangerously irrational. Howie's Christianity doesn't let him accept the islanders' beliefs, and their beliefs require drastic, illogical solutions to agricultural problems. Aided by Paul Giovanni's music, The Wicker Man takes us to another world, a bucolic, sexually liberated utopia with dark secrets and a hidden agenda. When I first saw this movie at the State Theatre in Sydney, it blew me away. I expected a last-minute reprieve for Howie because all the movies I'd seen previously had endings where the protagonist prevailed. Not this one. Not many people remember the Don Shane Cherry Cafaro Ginger trilogy. The three films Ginger, The Abductors and Girls Are For Loving were made in the early 1970s. They star Sherry Cafaro as Ginger McAllister, a wealthy female low-budget James Bond. Ginger is a forthright, no-bullshit force of nature. Bisexual and sardonic, she's given assignments by her handler Jason Barone, played by William Grinnell, as if the character was a mafia goomba and not an intelligence agent. These movies combined soft-core sex, more than a touch of sadism, some clumsy martial arts, and amusing dialogue. Girls Are For Loving was the third in the trilogy and shows the virtues of a somewhat larger budget. Filmed partly in St Thomas and the Virgin Islands, in this one Ginger goes up against a female antagonist, Ronnie St Clair, played by Jocelyn Peters. Ronnie is a poster child for rich white entitlement and wants to do some insider share trading. To do this, she needs to know which companies are going to get US government contracts. This being a Ginger McAllister movie, Ronnie uses sex and violence as her weapons. Cherry Cafaro wasn't a good actor, a good dancer, or a good singer, but she had attitude and presence. Girls Are For Loving is an acquired taste that I acquired at an impressionable age. It's a vulgar pleasure of mine, and I'm not ashamed of it. This movie was insanely popular where I grew up. It showed up on the schedule at the single-screen Regal Theatre in Liverpool multiple times. There were two simple reasons for its popularity in a working-class suburb. It was a dead simple movie in two parts. One half is about robbing a supermarket, and the rest of the film is a bunch of car chases. Starring Peter Fonda, Susan George, Adam Rourke and Vic Morrow with a cameo by Roddy McDowall, the story is really simple. Fonda and Rourke play Larry and Deke, a couple of NASCAR wannabes, who extort $150,000 from a supermarket owner to finance their move into motor racing. Larry has a one-night stand with Mary, Susan George in bell-bottom jeans, who talks her way into joining them for their getaway, while Captain Everett Franklin, Vic Morrow, pursues them. They start out in a souped-up 1966 Chevy Impala and then move on to a lime green 1969 Dodge Charger, being chased across rural southern California by police cars and a Bell Jet Ranger helicopter. The car stunts are really impressive in this one, the actors engaging, particularly Vic Morrow as a cop, and there's a surprise ending that ties it all up in a neat package of dusty, rebellious, 1970s car chase action. In the early 1970s, film censorship in Australia was ridiculous. The Conservative government at the time, still under the shadow of the 1950s, eventually put on its big boy pants and instituted the R rating system. This rating enabled people over 18 to see movies with violence, adult concepts, nudity, non-penetrative sex acts, and all the stuff that I as a 16-year-old wanted to see. As inevitably happens in human societies, when censorship breaks down, the creative people go crazily mad with the things that were previously taboo. Australian movie making did the same thing, which is how we got exploitation and Alvin Purple. Director Tim Burstall, who had previously made some serious movies, and decided that he wanted to make an Australian version of the Decameron, Pier Paolo Pasolini's 1971 film, which was very popular here because nudity. Burstall also noticed that a 1970 Danish sex comedy, Bedroom Mazurka, was making a shit ton of money at the box office. He considered 26 stories from a number of Australian writers before deciding to go with Alan Hopgood's Alvin Purple. Alvin Purple was Australia's first attempt at a nudie sex comedy. Graham Blundell starred as the titular character, a not too bright everyman who had the curse of being irresistible to women and to drag artists. Alvin gets mixed up with a dodgy psychologist called Dr. McBurney, played by George Whaley, who sets Alvin up as a sex therapist. Things inevitably go wrong and we end up with car chases through drive-in movie theatres, skydiving, and hordes of horny women chasing Alvin through the Melbourne CBD. Of course, we also get a lot of female nudity, some of it of actors who have now had long distinguished careers since the 1970s, including one Oscar nominee. I'll leave you to find out who that is. Alvin Purple spawned 2 sequels, Alvin Rides Again in 1974 and Melvin Son of Alvin in 1984, and neither of them were very good. ABC TV also produced a television series version of it with Blundell in 1976. Alvin Purple was silly, sexy fun, very much in the style of one of its inspirations, Bedroom Mazurka. A lot of people have fond memories of it, but it's very much of its time and is anything but politically correct. The character of Elle Driver, played by Daryl Hannah in Tarantino's Kill Bill, is a direct homage to the protagonist of thriller A Cruel Picture, Madeleine, the character played by Christina Lindberg in this Swedish rape and revenge exploitation movie. Also known by the even uglier title, They Call Her One Eye, this movie is uncompromisingly bleak but hypnotically watchable. Christina Lindberg's character Madeleine, who was sexually assaulted as a child, is mute as a result of the trauma. She lives on a rural dairy farm with her parents, and while on her way to a therapy session, she is given a lift by a superficially charming guy in a sports car, Tony, played by Heinz Hoff. Tony drugs her and keeps her sedated while he gives her a heroin addiction. He runs a stable of drug-addicted sex workers, and Madeleine is his latest victim. When she scratches the face of her first prospective customer, Tony puts a knife through her eye. Forced into ugly and degrading sex work, Madeleine plans and carries out her revenge. In her spare time, she trains in martial arts and learns how to use various guns and rifles, and wreaks havoc on her attackers. Christina Lindberg, who also appeared in softcore erotica at the time, is a striking protagonist. With a doll-like emotionless face and no dialogue, she's one of the strangest and saddest vigilantes in movie history. Thriller A Cruel Picture is also transgressive because of the hardcore sex scene inserts performed by a Swedish couple known as Romeo and Julie, which emphasise the anonymous, emotionless and degrading nature of sex work. Even more horrible, the eye-gouging scene was filmed by director, writer, producer Bo Arnie Verbenius, using a real cadaver of a female suicide victim. This one is Grindhouse cinema at its bleakest and most compelling. It pulls no punches and even to this day is hard to watch. Exploitation movies had it all: blood, horror, adventure, gratuitous and abundant nudity, silliness and entertainment. I miss them as a genre, but it wouldn't feel right to see movies like this in a multiplex with digital movie posters on the walls. They were artifacts of a moment in history when censorship was easing and good taste was declining, and I love that. Thanks for watching. There'll be another one of these videos in 2 weeks. Hit the like button if you like this video. Hit subscribe if you really liked it. And if symptoms persist, see a doctor.